Now, I wanted to focus on the issue of police reforms. This is something we had agreed to speak on earlier, and then it just became even more important, not more important, more poignant, I would say, after the BBC documentary came live yesterday. But basically, the issue of police brutality has been plaguing us since independence. Political repression, targeted killings, and torture were very common under the Kanu regime. But let me start threading from 2009 for the purpose of Dismiss Me With That, when widespread calls for police reforms came after the murder of a lawyer and human rights activist Oscar Kamau Kingara and his assistant John Paul Oulu. The way in which the men were killed left many looking at security agencies. The UN rapporteur on extrajudicial killings asked for independent investigations, stating that the way these men were killed was likely to cast suspicions on the police. The promulgation of the new constitution in 2010 brought with it some really radical changes to our police force, including the formation of IPOA and the NPSC, the National Police Service Commission, which has a mandate that includes investigating, hearing, and determining cases of police misconduct, and of course working in tandem with IPOA. Despite a new constitutional dispensation, units like the Special Crimes Prevention Units, that's the SCPU, the Flying Squad, and the Special Service Unit have faced accusations of operating more or less like death squads. The calls for reforms continued, and then came disbandments. First in 2019, with the Flying Squad being disbanded by former DCI George Kinoti. The replacement of by Sting Squad Headquarters, that's SSU, focusing on organized crime and terrorism to replace that Flying Squad. In 2022, President William Ruto ordered the disbandment of the SSU. And of course, the reason was the enforced disappearances, summary and executions, and other accusations. Now, the disappearance of 2 Indian nationals and their killing was what triggered and drove this disbandment. Of course, the DCI at the time, Amin Mohammed, DCI boss, ordered for the investigations into officers from the SSU. If these reforms were not enough, there was many more declarations that came after, including those pertaining to extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, police accountability, excessive use of force. As it stands, though, since its inception to June 2024, IPOA has received 30,493 complaints. Of these, 10,022 were recommended for investigations. 878 were forwarded to the ODPP. By June 2024, there were 918 cases before the courts and only 33 convictions made. Some of these cases are still in court being appealed. As it stands, police reforms have happened on paper, but not in practice. As it stands, the events of June 25th paint a clear picture of the psyche of our security agencies. So as we say that we are on the journey of police reforms, I say, miss me with that. Yeah. Doing this was intentional, 1, hard, 2, 3, just again, very intense, because the glaring gaps have been there since independence. I think if we want to look at what the police force, now police service, has looked like for most Kenyans, it doesn't inspire much confidence. I don't think for a lot of people, they feel safer around our police service, especially when it comes to anything that has to do with going against government or going against power in any form or any sense. So the fact that we are in a position now when we're questioning this has come from these many years of saying what happened. What happened to Oscar? What happened to Paul? What happened to the many others that came before them? What happened to those who were tortured or killed by previous regimes? Where's the justice for them? As we ask for justice for those who lost their lives in June and July last year. And of course, all through, after, before, I don't even know where to begin, like threading this. But my thing is, we have rebranded the police service from a force to a service. We have called for reforms. We have had statements from the executive talking about extrajudicial killings and how they will come to an end. We have had statements from the DCI boss calling for investigations into things like this. But it's all talk, no action. So for me, police reform is a miss me with that. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And I mean, this is one of those things that we just do. We say things for the sake of saying, and then they just become buzzwords. The issue of police reforms started even before this current constitution. Right? And we felt, well, people felt that the executive was using the police as a tool with which to suppress the people, in continuation of what the colonial government was doing with the police. The police were a tool for the colonial government to make sure that the Watus, the natives, behave. Okay? If we don't want the natives to come to Nairobi, we control them using the police. If the natives start making noise, we control them using the police. We remove them from their homes, we take them to concentration camps. Well, we call them Geshagis, villages. That's where shags came from. Come into this area where it's a concentration place. All of you stay there so that you can leave the land for us. If the natives start, agitating for their land back, we use the police to suppress them. And therein comes the emergency war. The government, independent governments of Kenya, was said to have continued using the police service for the same purposes, not to serve the people, not to make sure that the people are secure, because that's it, maintaining law and order and offering security, but for the executive to extend its hand into how to control the people. And so the push for a constitution was also the push to, one, devolve power from this centralized presidency, and also make sure that you remove the direct access of the political leadership to policing and maintenance of law and order. Hence, the establishment of the National Police Service Commission and attempting to make it independent. Even the bosses of the police service shall be picked by the National Police Service Commission. That was the initial idea, that the president shall not appoint an Inspector General of Police, because then the Inspector General of Police will be beholden to the president. So let's create a National Police Service Commission that hires the Inspector General of Police and everybody within the police service. We made some changes to the security laws and gave the president the power again to appoint the IG of police. But at the same time, we started talking about doing police reforms in this country. Various reports are there on the police reforms. The latest one was last year by Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga. Again, looking at reforms not only in the police service, but also in the prison service and in the Kenya Prison Service and the National Youth Service. So these disciplined forces, how do we make sure that they have reforms so that they can serve the people better? So that utumishi kwa wote becomes utumishi kwa wote. Just even setting aside the fact that the court declared that unconstitutional, the president cannot be appointing the job, Maraga, to do the job of the National Police Service Commission. That's why we created it in the constitution.
In the first place,
But just that fact that even then hasn't moved. 4 days ago, the Interior's PS, Dr. Raymond Omolo, was in the news promising that we are going to implement the Maraga report. Promises, promises, promises. Our police reforms are just a buzzword. And like you're saying, in you pussy.
Sorry, just before you go, Janet,
No, go ahead.
I wanted to just say that as I am saying this, I'm cognizant of the challenges that the police service faces, the lack of funding, the structural problems that they face, the, of course, minimal budgets that they get, understaffed, underpaid, overworked, the amount of mental anguish that our police officers go through as they carry out their duties is also not something that I make light of. It is completely part of the problem. If we were to have actual police reforms, those things would also not be an issue. But it is also just saying that, as I say that police reforms are a rumor, they're on paper, not in real life, it's cognizant of the issues that they face and not putting the entire blame on the force. That this is a structural issue, that individuals do need to be held accountable and the force does need structural changes, but we're still cognizant of what they go through. But sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. I'm just processing what both you and Eric have said, because sometimes I listen and my thoughts, I'm trying to go from, do we start at reforms without results is performative? Do we go to, I'm trying to figure out where to start from. Let me almost pick up from what you've just said, because is it a chicken and egg thing? Sometimes I'm like, how do you actually move beyond this problematic issue if the system is broken. Therefore, those who are supposed to exercise the force are broken. Not an excuse at all, but an explanation. Sometimes then I wonder where one needs to begin to clean house, you know, because it's almost like a dual house cleaning,
right?
You know, because you also can't dehumanize the same force. It's not a service, it's a force. I'm sorry. We're going to go back. It's not a service. Service is service. What we continue to see is anything but service. It's force. And then you see what a lot of them have done in their own personal lives. The murder, suicides, to your point about mental anguish. So there's almost like a sense of vengeance and anger as they exercise their duties. So where do you begin dual house cleaning? I know that we're having this conversation over a period of time today, but I really want us to think about what would that even look like, even as we ask of them to do their duty well. Yes, we recognize that there's so much that has failed you. The same system you serve has failed you, therefore it breaks you, but at the same time you have a duty. And what you're doing is you're weaponizing that duty against the citizens.
You know,
yeah.
What you've asked has been answered by many task forces that have been established to actually look at this. And all of them look at the structure. In fact, in the entire run-up to adding this issue of police reforms in our constitution, and thereafter, it was the issue of the structure of the police service. Okay? A team was established initially. It was the National Police Service Commission. And the first task of the National Police Service Commission, after it was established through the Constitution, was look at the entire police service, weed out the bad apples. Okay? They went, and the Kavuludi team, he was the first chairman of the National Police Service Commission, Johnston Kavuludi, Walimu, a civilian, come in, and he led this team. They were interviewing all police officers, all of them. And they recommended that this police officer does not serve. This police officer needs to quit. So many police officers were actually fired through this reforms process. The second thing that they were supposed to do is now look at structural. Structurally, what do we do with this police service? Okay? As some things had already been done and established that, you know, we have one police service, it needs to have one command center, the IG of police. Previously, we had the police, what was it? He was not Inspector General, he was Police Commissioner.
Yes.
The Commissioner of Police, and the Commissioner of Prisons, and the Commissioner of the AP. Now he said, Police and AP, one IG, one command center.
Right.
Structurally, how then do you also approach these others? And they said, we've got to look at the leadership of the police service. We have to look at the funding for the police service. The Constitution says that it's an independent entity, so it should also control its own budget. We have to look at how we recruit and train our police officers. But also a huge part of this is the welfare of the police officers. These, by the way, police officers are our brothers, sisters, cousins who are okay with us. They are looking for a job, and they are so happy when they're going for the recruitment exercise. They are so happy when they get the letter to go to Kiganjo or to go to the AP training school or GSU training school. And we are all so happy that, oh my God, Mariam got a job. They go to Kiganjo, they come out, and we are happy that this is a police officer. They get into that structure, which was never reformed. We just need to go back and do what we were supposed to do. Reform the structure and make sure that you're reforming the structure by funding. Maraga's report, the latest one, mirrors what was said earlier. What are the challenges? Underfunding, corruption in the service, leadership, leadership in the Police Service Commission. And in fact, if you just allow me, I'll read an abridged version of the summary of this report, which was prepared by the ICJ Kenya. And they said, the task force identified various issues as the challenges. The challenges facing the services were not just laws, policies, institutions, and processes, but also leadership gaps in the services. It became clear that the reform recommendations stand little chance of being implemented if the leadership issues in the respective services are not boldly addressed. Okay? So they said, these are the challenges that basically are facing our service. And we've got to boldly address, starting from the leadership, into then the structure. If we do not put more money into the police service, if we do not house our police officers, if we do not offer them the services, let this officer be proud of the job that they do. And then if you do not use all those, the fact that you have basically subdued this individual whom you have trained and given a firearm, you've subdued them. If you've not done that, like the way we cage a dog and unleash it at night, so that it is yani na watu. Why do you do that with dogs?
Right.
Mchana usiache dog mchana, you lock it up, you fungulia it at night, so that at night it can bark and bite people. That's what we do with our police officers.
Because who benefits?
The one who's caging the dog.
The dog.
Exactly. So,
the oversight side of things is also a really glaring gap. As much as we have an independent police oversight authority, I've given you the statistics of how many cases have actually been tried to completion. And out of 30,000 complaints, 10,000 were recommended for prosecution. Of those, only 33 so far have actually ended up being prosecuted. That tells you that A, there's either a lack of capacity to do the job, or there is a lack of goodwill to do the job. Either that, or again, there's things that are stopping investigations from, starting and finishing. And the current actually chair of IPOA, that's Ahmed Isaac, did put out a statement yesterday after the airing of Blood Parliament, which is the BBC documentary. And he put out a statement on exactly how many lives were lost, how many complaints IPOA received as to that, and exactly how the investigations are ongoing. And I'll try and find it to just give you an overview of where those investigations are. But it's not very encouraging either, because it's a year on.
Yeah.
We're almost a year into since the anti-tax demos, if I may call them that. The fact that a lot of these investigations are still ongoing. Let me just open up the document so that we can see. Found it. Yes, status update on IPOA investigations into the conduct of police officers during the anti-finance bill demonstrations. A lot of them have a status that says investigations are ongoing. Matter under investigations, matter under investigation, matter under investigation for so many. The few that do have investigations completed have now been forwarded to the ODPP. That's, for example, the matter in the injury of a Francis Kipkorir Sawe from Uasin Gishu, who was shot. There's also the issue of Credo Onyaro from Uasin Gishu as well, who had blunt force trauma, and Chol Deng Malang. All of those have investigations that are completed. But for so many others, the issues are still under investigation. Names come up that you saw in that documentary, for example, like Eric Shieni, the matter of Rex Masai, Evans Kiraitu. Their matters are still before court or still under investigation. Rex Masai's issue before Milimani Court, Evans Kiraitu before Milimani Court. Those are still under the court process. And of course, we saw basically what happened to them in broad daylight yesterday.
I know we'll, in a few minutes, we'll go to a break. And when we come back, I think, Mariam, just pulling on, the expose would be good, because this is what is top of mind right now. And to your point, I mean, for the last year, which it's coming into up to a year, the feedback or pushback that Kenyans get from demanding justice just from these cases gives you an idea, I think, of the barriers to justice, of a constitutional betrayal. Every time I see matters like this happening, I'm like, you've betrayed the Constitution over and over and over again till you've normalized it. Now, Kenyans are not normalizing it. And this is where the tug of war is coming from. Right. We're in a time and date and space where a majority of Kenyans, actually I don't want to say that too broadly, but where many Kenyans are aware of how the Constitution protects them and aware of those who are antagonizing and betraying that same Constitution. It goes back to that. Everything we're talking about, police reforms, justice for the protesters who've lost their lives, justice for those who are unwell. There was one who was profiled, right? He's still bedridden. Didn't we profile that story? Brian, I think was his name. Even the responses and reactions from some policy makers or MPs yesterday after the BBC documentary, I was like, aha, this gives me an idea of how much in denial you are. From your perspective, we did the right thing. Constitutionally, though, you have not. And that tug of war, I think, is going to escalate. Because I think the bypassing of it seems so easy. It's okay, funga tuacha tufanye tu hivi. And we're saying, That's why we're pursuing justice in this way. It's a lot to pull out, but I think the data you've given in terms of even the cases that have seen the light of 33, out of how many? 33,000 to 33. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, let me make sure I got the numbers right. But yes, it was about 33 cases that have been, that have had convictions made. There's 918 before the court, but 33 convictions made. From its inception to June 2024, 33 convictions, 30,493 complaints. I'm
just going to go ahead and say it, but I think a lot of this is, it's intentional. That's a big thing to say. But there's something here that's not skipping a lot of people, the caged dog reference. Yeah, an intentionality to keep a force devoid of empathy in order to be weaponized against the people of the country. And maybe that's what we need to try and look at once we're back. Yeah,
which also now talks about even the rights of these individuals, our brothers and sisters and cousins and fathers and mothers who work in the police service, have their human rights been denied of them, right? When they're treated like this, and then you're unleashed upon a population, and you know very well, for example, look at these GSU officers yesterday. You've been ordered to go secure these people who are going to survey a piece of land.
Right.
And the people who are ordering you know that there is likelihood of about 1,000 people plus attacking you, armed with machetes, with bows and arrows. And you're there, okay? And now they tell you, but you know, you have service orders, you are supposed to do, you're carrying a firearm, but just accept the bullet or accept the arrow. You're basically just setting this police officer to take the action they were taking. What are we doing to our own people?
And how does that perpetuate how we now feel about them?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
a cycle that just continues. Let's engage on this, and we ask you, call us in. The numbers will be on the screen shortly. Also, we are engaging on our social media platforms. I can see they are already here. Kina Smallest Ever and Paul Maina Almarufu, Staki Mapepe and Lenny and Kevin Gitonga. I will be looking at what you're saying as well and amplifying it up here. But miss me with that today. Mariam Bishar is saying police reforms. Police what?
Miss me with that.
Police? Huh? We'll be back shortly.
For fade.
Yeah. Mike Adaka Mbarikiwa on Facebook says, miss me with that too. Also passing condolences to veteran radio presenter Edward Kwach, who passed away earlier.
Right.
But very many other people who are sending in their comments to this.
Yes, there are. There's on YouTube, and I think what you just alluded to on the passing of a media colleague will highlight at 9 a.m., one of the news fixes. Mouthpiece Kev, police Sasa should have go cameras, no trial without a point of arrest clip, and fines for those police officers who proceed to arrest offline. Let the videos testify. Ask Jeremy, what are these commissions for? Nearly none of the reforms get implemented. Which one do you know of that the government implemented? Yeah, Lenny, these investigations are waiting for other situations to come up to erode the intensity of the current and previous ones. What happened to the force of the men and women in Kianjo Koma Brothers case and so many others? There's a lot of engagement today. Thank you guys so much for engaging on this discussion, because honestly, it affects each and every one of us across the board.
Indeed, we're talking about police reforms, and Mariam, you've just taken us through the whole journey of the thinking that we ought to transform our police from police force to police service in word and deed, right? So we have it in word. It's a police service, national police service. Right. Is it indeed? Do people feel that they have trust in the police? And if they don't, why? It's because of how the police behaves and how the police treats them.
Yeah, why don't we go into why this urgent reform is needed now, Mariam, especially in light of, what a lot of people watched yesterday.
Yeah, it's been needed for a while. I think now it's just painfully, it's glaring and it's at you. It's like there was a wound there and just like torn it open afresh, and sometimes that's a good thing. It's not always a bad thing. I think the reform has been needed for a while, and I want to open this conversation up to security agencies as a whole and to the state as a whole, why we need reform for how we think about how we engage with our security agencies. Yesterday there was also, let me not go into that. I'll put a pin in that on that thought, but I'll pull out a thread around the KDF later. But basically, the fact that we have come this far, we have allowed this many injustices, things are boiling and not nicely, unfortunately, means that if we don't hold them to account now, we lose whatever leverage that we have. We lose the opportunity to get justice for any past victims, and we then allow ourselves to become even more beholden, more victimized, more brutalized in the future. I keep saying consistently, give an inch, they'll take a mile. We've given the inches, several of them. What happens next now, is up to us. And again, the reform is multifaceted. So I don't know where to begin, but I do have ideas of what it looks like, and I think we'll
get into that.
A deep dive into
I know
that.
before the break, Eric was starting to again pick up on our brothers and sisters in the police force, and again, it's almost like, is there such a thing as empathy light? Because I'm like, I hear you and I get it. And I'm not saying you're using it as an excuse, but sometimes it's hard to separate the two. So it's not to invalidate that these are people who already feel pushed to a corner in some cases, whether it's with regards to what they earn, how they're able to look after their families, what they're paid, the trauma they witness, and the lack of psychosocial support and debriefing that makes them sort of like held hostage by their trauma. And there's many ways that trauma projects and manifests, and one of those is violence and use of force. Right. Again, I just always have to go back to using explanation, not excuse, because there is no excuse for killing innocent, unarmed civilians, none. And we saw that come to light, I think, as Mariam alluded to, during this BBC documentary called Blood Parliament. It's on page 2 of the Daily Nation, where the state stopped the screening of this expose on protesters' killings. And it just kind of goes on to profile what this documentary was about, and why, again, that they weren't allowed to view it. But it says, BBC revisits shootings. A major case of focus in the expose is the shooting dead of Eric Shieni, who was a finance student at the University of Nairobi. And they've put there 150 images that were profiled to piece together this particular case. And you can see, if you're watching it on NTV, part of it is playing out on our screens. A screening of BBC Africa Eye's Blood Parliament in Kenya was cancelled because of pressures from the authorities. We're disappointed not to have been able to share the documentary and panel discussion as planned. In the meantime, audiences can watch the film. That's what it goes on to say. The media house analyzed more than 150 images that were taken after and before Shieni was shot, and they were able to identify the soldier who fired at the back of his head. This is, again, according to the article on page 2. The identity of the officer has yet to be made public, but his images have been widely circulated. According to the BBC expose, the shooter was a member of the armed forces. However, the KDF has dismissed the expose, which linked its officer to the death of one of the protesters in Parliament during the June 25th protest against the finance bill. So it just goes on to give not only a bit of details of this expose, it also goes on to give some reactions, and then it goes back to recap some of the images and profiles of the shootings that were made familiar to the public as of last year. I think all this is to say that it goes back to a sense of denial, and lack of accountability. But I'm always like, the way when you're doing a root canal, it's like, it's painful and we have to get to the root. I think there's cultural issues, there's system issues, there's lack of accountability issues. It actually took me to the time in 2020, during George Floyd's shooting in the US, when they say defund the police. I know we're going to, in the next hour, talk about what does police reform look like, but I was reminded of how citizens begin to push back at the police. Their pushback, especially some of the activists, were like, defund them, meaning take away some of this power from them. And sometimes I see mirrors of it, is you've put a lot of power in these people. So how do we begin to spread out some of this power so that then you're not always looking at the gun thinking it's going to be me next? Right?
That part is extremely true. That headline on page 2, state stops screening of BBC expose on protesters' killings. That was meant to be a screening at a theater in Nairobi, a private theater, and they said due to pressure from the authorities, they've had to stop the screening. I think when I say miss me with that on police reform, or when we say that our issues are systemic, and that it's truly a problem from above, it's things like these. Because if there was really goodwill to have police reform, to have oversight, to end extrajudicial killings and excessive use of force by the police, to end disappearances, this wouldn't be a problem. This would be something that's pointing out an issue, and it would be like, okay, how do we work with the BBC to then find justice for Rex, for Eric, for Erickson, for Daniel Chege, for everyone who lost their life that day. Another glaring thing about the documentary that got me is footage was sourced from NTV, from KTN, from Citizen, from all over, but you could only credit NTV, KTN, Citizen, could not, so many photojournalists who are on the ground gave their footage, so many just private citizens who had footage gave it, and they analyzed thousands of images, but no single one could be credited because of the fear of, you know what the fear is, right?
Yep.
That tells you exactly what we're operating in. This is work that ideally should be in the public eye, that people should know you contributed to something like this,
right?
But your name can't be put next to a documentary like that.
Indeed.
Because of a fear for your safety.
We have a call on the line as we continue this conversation. Jackson, who's on the line? Henry. Henry, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Thank you very much for calling in this morning. We are talking about the urgent need for police reform. What's your comment on this?
Yeah, so far, Eric, it's very saddening because some things ukiangalia, even especially this week yenye mmegusia, where there was a person that was saying that I've lived in this place for over 30 years. Now, all of a sudden, people just pull up, wanataka kuwa evict and all that without any, hamjakuwa informed anything. Hiyo kitu, Eric, to be honest, me personally, we've seen this most of the time. People pull up at your place at 4 a.m. with machetes and panga, and police 1 hour company. And that makes me think, hata nijuzi I was telling my wife, the more I watch news as a youth, the more I feel the need, like, the day I will own my property, like, nimebuy land, nimejenga, nimesettle, then you guys just pull up with machetes and Eric, I don't know, okay, I'm angry, but yeah, let me cool down.
Yeah, it's valid.
It's very sad to see every day tunaona kwa TV, people in Kilifi, people different part of the country, just ataikuna na send watu, nyinyi mnashtukia tu place imekaa for over 20 years, your ancestors were there, then mnakuja mtu ambao nyinyi hamfai kukaa hapa and all that. And that makes me think, am I even safe? Tuseme sahi I don't have a land, bado ndio naeka misingi yangu amsi, bado ni kijana and all that. Then when nimesettle, nimework hard, kila kitu nimesettle, nimebuy kapisa yangu land, nimejenga nyumba where I intend to raise my family. Then all of a sudden people just pull up, wanna show up, kwa evict, kwa idea and all that. That's really saddening, and it makes me think, ikifika point whereby sisi as civilian we lack confidence in our own authorities. Just tumefika point whereby we don't care, tunajuazi polisi hawatatusaidia, so hiyo lead to nini? It will make maybe itabidi sana nijiarm, because if nimejenga my friend na I feel like, what if one day someone just pulls up and try to destroy my property? So and it got me even thinking that, what if nikisha own my property, nikisema vizuri, also legally I apply to own a rifle or even a shotgun, because Eric, we cannot take any chances with this.
That's
government.
True, Henry. That's true. We hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing leads to another. It leads to another. It's causation. This is if something happens today, then it just goes on to cause things and people to do something. Thank you very much for calling in, Henry. And you can call in as well. Let's hear from you. We are talking about the urgent need for police reforms. We've been talking about police reforms forever in this country. Every time there's a task force that's established, there's action that's taken. There's changes at the helm of the police service. There's we have institutions established in the Constitution, and the whole idea was, can we reform a police so that it serves the people, right? Not a police that is a force used by those in power against the people to oppress the people, but one that serves the people.
I wonder whether we can also get to a point where we force reforms to offer results, because you're reshuffling, but you're reshuffling, dare I say, rogue units, So what have you reformed? And why are you just like, okay, this didn't work, let's disband it? No. There's some things which should be taken almost as if it's irreversible. If you formed it, follow through and give us results. Because I think the reshuffling, the reforming, it's also a tactic, I think, to disrupt maybe a thread of something that was going to come out with results. But let's force you to get to work.
Which comes to that, you know, at the operational level, if the structure has not been reformed operationally, then it's made to continue doing this. If we just went back and said, this is meant to be a police service, all right? So how do we make this a police service? How does a good police service look like? We have all these documents. We've had conversations in this country of how a police service should work. Even police officers have said, you know, the ordinary police officer, Janet, is not against police reforms. Because police reforms...
It also benefits them.
Benefit this officer. And it's because of all these things that you have done to this person, you're basically dehumanizing them and stripping them and doing this and then sending them out. And, you know, you've already told them, you must follow orders, this is it. And this, I mean, it's a disciplined service. You don't just come in and start questioning. You follow orders, right? But then you have so dehumanized this person that the only option out is walking through that door. And walking through that door could lead to me dying or somebody dying. Who's it going to be? I've given you a gun, so are you the one who's going to die? No, make sure that that person dies. If we don't reform the structure, like we've said many times, then any other talk here is just
a waste of our time. The fact that we've done it, we've questioned and said let's reform is not, it's nothing new to like the Kenyan psyche, but something Tibbs says police need to be allowed to protest on humanitarian grounds. Absolutely true. It's like Eric said, is it a curtailment of their rights that has led us here partly? Is that part of the problem? And I think that is definitely a big part of the problem. When you are pinned down, either overburdened, overworked, underpaid, a combination of all of those, it is really, really easy to then have your psyche change, and then of course your aggressiveness levels. You've spoken to the mental health problems that we have, the cases of suicide by police officers, murder-suicide, all across the country, and they seem to be on the rise, or either we're more cognizant of them or they are genuinely more on the rise. All those things are a melting pot, and they are the ones that have led us here.
To where we are. And like you said, even when we came back after this break where we said, why is real reform urgent now? And you said, no, it's been urgent. I just think we've had a new wound opened. I'm willing to bet, and I think over the next few days, even tomorrow, we'll be speaking to hopefully some human rights activists, etc. But sometimes I look at something that doesn't seem like an agenda, but is an agenda. Sometimes it sounds like a delusional thing to say, but there has to be something intentional about wearing people down for your benefit. And that's the thing that I see playing out. It started being very obvious just after the protests last year, when the protests were at their height of success, in the sense of, man, you collectively got people on the streets to speak about an infringement of their rights, a violation of the Constitution because of the heavy taxes, until it was co-opted, disrupted. And then what happened after is every time there was an attempt to gather again, whether it was in conversation or protest, the force within which that was met. These tactics work, right? You not listening, or the police not being heard in terms of the reforms that are required for them. Everybody knows those are required. That is another strategy. Having this expose clearly show, according to the documentary, the perpetrator, the victim, and not recognizing that as a point, a teachable moment to say, hey, Enyewe, I think we really need to look into this situation, but instead coming out with, no, this is a lie, this is fueling public anger, is a strategy. What that is, I'm not sure. I have my thoughts, but I'm 100% sure this week other people are going to begin to confirm, like, yeah, this is what happens when you want to wear society down. You keep gaslighting, you keep pushing back, you keep saying, we're doing this, but then you don't do it because you know very well you've done that for the last decade. Sometimes I go big, sometimes my head goes shwee, but the point is, addressing this issue is going to be so multi-pronged, so intentional, and then you have to be able to, and I've said it before, sustain the momentum to see change. Otherwise, you will be worn down. And when you're worn down, you release, you relent.
Yeah.
You're like, wacha ikae. I don't need to do anything. But I just feel like
Right.
you feel so burdened by all of this coming at you. That is what it's supposed to do. And I think once people recognize that, then it allows you to say, this fight is mine in my way. Is it through my poem? Is it through my article? Is it through my tweet? Is it through a discussion on my table? Is it through tabling something or writing a letter to my MCA? This fight is mine. What can I do to sustain it without being worn down? Because I'm already worn down. I'm tired. You can't be tired.
Right.
Yeah.
Eric, I know you have a couple of thoughts there, but I just wanted to ask you guys, before we get into the next hour, we've spoken to the issues that plague the police service. Would you say those same issues plague our armed forces?
I think so. I think
some degree.
our disciplined forces, just like the Maraga report was not just looking at the police, it was also looking at the prisons. That song, Jailer, Mr. Jailer,
Mr. Jailer,
stop calling me a prisoner and we are here with you. I mean, we are both in this prison. It's just that you are on the other side of the door, I'm on this side of the door, but we are both within the walls of the prison. It's the same. It's the same across all our disciplined services, because we know that they cannot rise up, but we know that we can use them as we wish. Right? And I think, and I'm saying again, it's not a new realization. We have realized this as a country, and there are those who have, lost a limb, lost a voice, just saying and raising the issue of the urgent need to do something. We need just to step back and say, okay, so who's been talking about it? How do we support them? How do we get these police reforms done? How do we get, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, ICJ Kenya, Vocal Africa, Muhuri, all of them have been talking about police reforms, and they have looked at all these reports. They've participated, they've given their ideas to this report. They just go, they gather dust. How do we support them so we can get these reports off the shelves and actually start implementing them? And not stop clawing back by saying, because we have seen what happened with the first Inspector General of Police, and then we saw there was an attack at Westgate, and then we saw, the police were independent, and you see now we were asking the president, so how are we secure? And we come back with an excuse to Parliament. You see now the president has no say on who's the Inspector General of Police, and yet the president is on who's ultimately swore to protect lives and property of the people and the Constitution. So then the police need to have a way, and we amend the law. And we make now the president pick the IG of police. South. How do we just reverse this? We have to start by knowing what we've done so far.
Right.
2 minutes to 9. Let's take a break. We'll be picking your calls in the next hour and also asking ourselves, so how do the reforms look like, right?
Right.
And what is it that we should do to reform the police service, as well as looking at all the other disciplines
on YouTube to suggest some of those reforms. They're coming. We'll look at global police forces, but we want to, of course, hear from the fixers on what police reforms would look like. We'll be right back after this. We're trying to get back into our conversation, which is equally as drab, if we're being honest. And we're trying to figure out police reforms and what they look like. I'll begin maybe with a few of the comments on YouTube. Fixers have fixes, yes? Police reforms, Ask Jeremy starts off the bat with body cams. They should be one of the requirements by police when in the line of duty. I think it's definitely a great place to start. If we can maintain the integrity of the body cams, then I think it would be an amazing thing to have body cams on police so that we know what you did, where you did it, when you did it, what led to you doing it, contextualizing the situation, all of that. Paul Maina, Almarufu Staki Mapepe, the training of police is shallow and they don't seem to have any psychology in their curriculum. It's like they are trained to be ruthless. Kama kuna psychology, labda ni unit moja tu. And we'll talk about training as we look at that, because we've talked about de-escalation tactics. Is that something taught at Kiganjo or in our police service as a whole? Psychology as well. How, it doesn't always have to be gun before words or force before anything else. Right. So it's a good question to ask. Kuna psychology units. Yeah.
He also has another interesting comment there on YouTube where he says, I suggest we increase the cutoff entry to police academy or college so that we can have police who are learned or maybe have gone further in their studies. He says, for now, police force is often for those who didn't make it in Form 4.
I've heard this argument before. I'm not sure where I rest on it because I don't know if our KCPE, KCSE are adequate judgments of intelligence. So I wouldn't want to say automatically that if you got a C plus or a D plus, that means you are incapable of being a good police officer.
Is it exposure and experience? Does that matter somewhat? I'm with you. I'm always 50-50 about this, but is it your, I don't know, 18, 19, 20, exposure, experience, trigger happy, all of those things? But we'll continue. I know we have calls coming in.
I mean, that's a big debate. I'm not for it at all. But, I mean, we could say that
for raising the academic bar.
Yeah. You could say that, you know, certain cadres of police service, then you'll require certain levels of education, just like they do in the military. The commissioned officers are usually graduates who go to Lanet, and then those are the ones who have a chance of rising to become a general. But also maybe it's the same for the police service. And the police officers, the police bosses that we've had are graduates. But you have problems with them as well. We've got callers on the line, Jax, all right? John from Bungoma, good morning, Fixer.
Good morning, Eric.
Thank you for calling in. How are you?
I'm very fine. I'm very just interrupted their conversation.
Yep.
But what about when you ask about what happened during the parliament when I said my blood? What?
We've lost John. So you can call in as well. The numbers are on the screen. Or 0719 if you are following us on radio. 0719 038858. 0719 038858. Callers, what's your idea of how we can institute police reforms, and what's the approach that we take in instituting police reforms, and how well does it differ from what has been suggested before? What new idea can we add into it? Yeah.
Still on the body cams. Mouthpiece Kev says police should have go cameras, no trial without a point of arrest clip, and fines for police officers who proceed to arrest offline. Let the videos testify. I think it's, we see too many cases of he said, she said, which is basically what a court of law is, but without proper evidence. And sometimes, like you said, I think the US is a good case for body cams because you do get to see exactly what transpired, what led to an incident happening, to an arrest happening, and we can follow that. Sorry, what's the name of the caller, Jaxo? Rapenda from Bondo. All right, let's hear from Rapenda. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well. What are your ideas around this police reform question?
First of all, I will want to advise the junior police officers to stop taking unlawful orders. Because, for example, what happened yesterday in Narok? You see, I saw an officer who sustained an arrow shot injury, but you know, most likely that officer does not even come from Narok. It does not even have an interest in the land in Narok. But there's somebody who sent him there, actually, who knew that there will be chaos, but the guy remained in the office. Because we see surveyors daily, even where we come from, but they are never accompanied by police officers. By the time the surveyors were being accompanied by police officers, they anticipated war. So the senior who sent them knew there was going to be war, which was there eventually. So they should actually learn to not take unlawful orders. And lastly, I want to ask these guys who have the appetite for land, let them tell Kenyans how much they need. We contribute for them, they have it, and they leave our children alone. Because I can imagine that area today. I don't even think children are going to school there. I can imagine that health center where there were chaos yesterday, gunshot everywhere. How are the sick in that hospital feeling? Let them tell us how much land they need. I'll lead the fundraiser. So that they leave Kenyans to live in peace. Because it can't be about land. They're killing people. You go to Kilifi. We are not even sure about our title deeds we own. You can wake up today, the way we woke up today, we go to our hustle. But in the afternoon, bulldozers will be bringing your houses down. Look at what's happening at the river. So the police officers might say no to being misused. It is the junior officers who must start saying no. Otherwise, it is them who are suffering. Look at one as just a gunshot, an arrow shot. I'm sure he's going to be abandoned in the hands of Shah, and eventually we'll find a dismissal letter. Otherwise, thank you very much for the good show.
Thank you, Rapenda. Thank you so much. I think you're absolutely right when you say that we have to stop taking unlawful orders. I do wonder where that sits, though, in the structure of a disciplined force.
Yeah.
I am not privy to, because if an officer refuses an order, it's insubordination.
Right.
But
Could
if
force your
the
dismissal.
order is unlawful,
It's at what point do you actually determine the lawlessness or lawfulness of the order, and then also if you have officers who will come and say, Fando Sinsumbwe, nisiendi huko nanituma. In my opinion, it was illegal what he was telling me to do. Right now, how do we strike that balance? Again, I come back to there are structures in place for it. If the officer in charge knows that I am responsible for what happens here, that I will not give advice to my bosses that let's send in 15 officers to go and confront 1,500 people who are armed, then how do we deal with it? Okay, that is how we look at it structurally from the very top. How do you make sure that the police are well resourced to handle the various ways of law enforcement?
Right.
Law enforcement is not necessarily coming up with a baton and a rungu and a gun and tear gas.
No, it goes
Law
deeper.
enforcement also goes deep into community policing. How do we endear ourselves to the community so that the community trusts us? How are we well resourced so that even the police and the community see each other as people who are doing the same thing?
That's a good point. And I know we'll be speaking a little bit to what does reform look like? What do structural overhauls look like? But right now we have Eric from Nakuru on the line. Eric, good morning. Please talk to us about your thoughts on police reforms.
Oh.
Okay, he dropped off. I was going to say our fixers who are calling in are exhaling. One said, look, do I have to protect myself? Is that what it's going to come to? I don't have land yet, but is this an indication of what I will face? And then Rapenda said, kama ni land mnataka, I will lead the fundraiser. They're frustrated. And a lot of people are measured. I think we're given a bad rap. More often than not, I think the people of this country want to do the right thing in the right way. But then you're confronted with injustices and circumvention of policies that are meant to protect you.
Right.
So thank you to those of you who've called and just expressed your frustration. Talked about how you're receiving all of the different news articles and stories that you're watching here on Fixing the Nation and Nation TV. I think keep doing that. This is a point of exhaling, but it's also now a point of solutions, and that's what we're trying to come to this hour. What do police reforms look like in an ideal world, in an ideal scenario? Mariam, is there an ideal scenario? They exist.
I don't know about ideal, but we love to benchmark as a country. So we can look to some of the countries that are known to have some of the best police forces. What are they doing different from us? Of course, one of the factors will be the economic factor. These will be world economic giants. So the amount that they invest in their police service is already, it's miles apart. And that's fair enough. Can't dismiss that. But are there things that they are doing that we could take without having to be economic powerhouses, globally? And we are still an economic powerhouse in the region, even though it might not last for long at this rate.
Right.
Japan, for example, is known for its community policing, known as Koban, where police officers are embedded in neighborhoods through small local police boxes, making them highly visible, trusted, and accessible. So as opposed to having a police station, just a little box where you have a few police officers stationed there. You can go talk to them. It's a conversation. It's nyumba kumi at its best. And guns are rarely used. De-escalation is prioritized. Officers undergo extensive training and are regularly rotated to avoid corruption. Some things that I'm going to pick there, of course, is the fact that they are highly visible, accessible, and trusted. That's a factor of their training that is regular and extensive, and rotation to avoid corruption. And you'll see some of those themes come across as you see the other case studies. Finland, also comes across. Extensive education for police officers. They undergo 3+ years of university level training. How much time do our police force spend in Kiganjo?
Yeah.
How many
6
months
months.
is it? 6 months, right? 6 months vis-a-vis 3 years. Again, these are economies that have the muscle to keep them in school for 3 years. But what can we learn from that?
What can we learn? Do we have a caller? I think.
Yeah, we have.
Okay, we have a caller on the
Evans.
line. All right.
Evans in Embakasi, good morning.
Morning, too.
Thank you for calling in. We are talking about police reforms. What's your input here?
I'm very much sorry because wakati unaangalia police, the way wanna interact with the citizens, actually they are very much brutal. And through my experience, during June 25th demonstration, in fact, most of them, the officers, they were inhuman. In fact, they killed young ones when walikuwa harmless, walikuwa cooperative, na walikuwa napeleka message they wanted good governance. But sasa ukiangalia hizo orders zenye wanapewa, in fact hawafuati ile katiba yao ya kusema service to the people, lakini not killing them. Na ukiangalia most of them wanna use a lot of force. In fact, not even what we call it is rubber whatever.
Rubber bullets.
Yes, but they use live bullets.
So Evans, how
Now,
do we fix it? How do we make sure that we have a service
I
that
think,
is
kwa wakubwa wao hapo ndio shida inaanzia. In fact, hao juniors kulingana ile kiapo wanakula wanafuatanga sheria ya wakubwa wao. Wakiambia aenda fagia ni kuenda kufagia. You have seen it. Tukijaribu ku raise our voices. In fact, kitu kama IPOA inaletwa na politicians. Wanakuanga appointed na president. That's why hata hawa watu watoa wanachukulia wengi wao wanatumwa na position. They don't take action. Hakuna polisi yoyote amekamatwa ameoa watu.
So it's a leadership issue.
I'm very much sorry. Hao vijana hakuna chance.
Thank you, Evans.
We need chance. In fact, kama hii document ya PPC inaonyeshana vile police brutality inafanyika in Kenya. Na media tunawashukuru sana. In fact, kama si media sasa vijana wangeuliwa karibu 1 million. So
thank you,
media,
Evans.
Na Mungu awabariki. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evans. Collective call to action. He's like, we have to raise our voices. I know Mariam was kind of taking us through some of the reforms, but I just wanted to come to Eric, because you've mentioned severally on during this conversation structures. Some people might, I'm just trying to understand whether the structural issues have been raised and talked about. So are you saying the structures are not enough? Are you saying they haven't been followed? Are you saying they need to be reviewed? Where are you coming from when you talk about structures?
So in all the reports that talk about police reforms from the very beginning, we say, let's convert this into a police service. How do we make it a police service that's responsive to the people? Then it looks at how do we recruit our officers, all the way to how do we promote our officers, how do we manage our officers, how do we equip our officers. That's a structure that I'm talking about, okay? How are we recruiting them? Do we have a clear and equitable way of recruiting our police officers into service? How are we training them? Are we training them to be animals, or are we training them with a humane way of policing? How are we equipping them? Are they coming out of Kiganjo and then coming to live in tin shacks in very hot areas, and then we tell them, toka up as we go do a bit and come back. We are sending them to Baragoi in basically just vehicles that are not armored, and telling them go with this one AK-47 and face people who are heavily armed. How are we supporting them? How are we supporting them psychosocially? But also at the top level, what's the management of our police service looking like? The National Police Service Commission, is it a commission that is forward thinking, or is it a commission that is looking at tukona officers wetu wako on the ground, officers wetu watafanya hii kazi? Or is it saying that our police need the support that they require so they can do the work? That's what I mean by structure.
Yeah.
And that all of these reports, even the Maraga report, was talking about how do we house these people? These people have families.
Right.
They are dealing with, so somebody has been sent to the north to go and quell the banditry. They know I could die here at any moment. Right? The kind of torture that they're going through, the kind of torture that their family is going through, do they have medical cover? Do they know that if I died, my family will be sorted, taken care of? All those things play a role. It's causation. You were made to be this way. Then when you react this way, we've got to look back like, did we actually lead you here? When we are seeing so many police officers shooting themselves in the head with a G3 rifle, how big that thing is, by the time you point it to your head and blow yourself up, what have you gone through? What is it that's with our police service? And the reforms that were recommended all these times are saying, let us make sure that our service is a service that serves the people. But those that frustrate the reforms want them to remain like that so that they can send them, officers, to an depot. And the only thing that you've given them is a tear gas canister or a bullet. Right? And then they're facing thousands of people who are coming at them. And the people, because of the historical lived experience, they don't trust you. They see you as an enemy. You know that these people are going to throw a stone at me wanting to injure me.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
And it goes back to something Mariam has said. On top of that, I would really want to further fully understand this training. Now I'm starting to understand, like, yeah, how are you trained? Again, that de-escalation term. I get Eric's point. It's like, okay, first of all, have I been trained when I have a group coming at me? And if I have, what have I been told to do? Because it seems like it's very reactive, you know? And is that because of your adrenaline? Fine. Is it something to do with your training? What does this training entail? I need that curriculum. Yeah, but we can now...
You may find that the training does not tell you fire tear gas directly at the protesters, right? And we've seen very many police officers who actually are good at de-escalation. There was a time when there was a GSU police officer down here in Nairobi who was stopping guys and telling people, young guys, this is our country. Let's just not. And you very many instances across the country when there are demonstrations and police will come and say, vijana, nini? Ni sawa tutulieni turudi. Tutulieni turudi. Okay? But the mistrust that has been generated by the way this police service is, so we don't trust the police.
Yeah.
This guy is coming to tell you, kijana, tulia nikusikize.
You're already high strung.
Just like, no, you're high strung, like you said. If we do not sort out the problem from the head of the snake.
Right. No. Couldn't have said it better, honestly. He's threaded it perfectly because it does take two to tango. There's a deep, deep mistrust. There's deep issues within the force. And that's what now plays out and leads us here.
The combination
where
of
we
both.
found ourselves. And I was looking through, Eric, you've said these recommendations have come time and time again on how we should reform the police force. I was threading what, police forces around the world that are termed as excellent do. And I wanted to see how many of these things are in those recommendations. The first one we talked about was the length of the training. So has there been any call to increase the length of training for police officers or the content of the training?
Maraga report, leadership of the National Police Service. The National Police Service is established to streamline the management of the human resource function and is thus mandated to promote professionalism and accountability. In this regard, it's expected to, among other things, formulate appropriate policies on training, on human capacity management and development, and also to exercise disciplinary control over the police service members and rid the service of, or at least minimize corruption, inefficiency, nepotism, and general lack of professional management. They say, regrettably, the National Police Service Commission leadership has acquiesced to the continued usurpation of its functions by the bosses in the police service, thereby exacerbating the vices that it was established to redress. So, the IG and his people are the ones who are also controlling the National Police Service Commission.
Right.
And the commission was supposed to come and make sure that the IG are changed. Change in the way they behave. But if the guys at the top are the ones who are still, you rise to the top and you're like, you become an IG after many years.
Yeah.
Hey,
20 years on the force.
This is how I know the police service to be. Okay? Tunaenda Kiganjo, tesa watu, tukana watu, dehumanize them. You hear the stories of the way they're treated in Kiganjo. It's insults, it's, you know, you are dehumanized. We are removing the civilian in you.
Oh my God.
We are putting a police officer in you. We
Removing
remove
the
the
empathy.
civilian in you.
I want us to come back to that soon. I know we have a caller.
Yes, we do have Gerald on the line. Gerald from Eldoret. Good morning, Gerald.
Yes, morning.
Morning. What do you think of our police
Hello?
reform conversation? Gerald, can you hear
Morning.
us? Good morning.
Hello.
Maybe turn down the
Yes,
volume of
I'm
your
getting
TV.
you.
Okay, go on.
Good morning.
Morning.
Gerard, zima TV tafadhali ama radio.
Yes.
Aya, tuambie, what's your thoughts on this police reforms?
Hello.
Gerard, wewe sasa tutadili na wewe baadaye.
We'll come back to you.
We try again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That threading of the empathy. But I know you've mentioned Japan and Finland.
Yes. As examples, with Japan, it was they're highly trained in de-escalation tactics and they do community policing. Guns are rarely used. To find a police force that isn't armed is already such a rarity, right?
By the way, our police service is not as heavily armed.
Agreed.
Okay? Let's just start from there.
That's fair.
Let's just start from there. There's a culture issue when you mentioned Japan. I also asked myself the culture of the people and the country as a nation. What's the moral fabric of this country? Right? Are people, you know, courteous to each other? They did it to one another?
They are.
So when they see each other, do they treat each other, you know, with courtesy and all? So when you see a police officer, you've been brought up and trained that, you know, you respect uniform, you respect authority, you go to it for support. And this person in the police service grew up in our community. So all those things that I have, they have, right? So they're also going to know, okay, you come to me, uko na shida, how can I help you? I'm here to help. Haujakuja kunisumbua. Or I'm not here because we've been cultured. Yesterday,
Isn't that community policing?
Yesterday is when we're talking about, you know, off air on how we've been socialized with exams. No, it wasn't in this setting. But you see the way we have exams. If you're told today set an exam for us, you'll think how to make it the most difficult. How not to give a hint.
To make it a torture device, basically.
You get a moment, an opportunity to have power. You want to milk that power as teachers milk power, parents milk power, police milk power. You come to a police station. Wataka nini? Kaa hapo kwanza. You know, just exercising power. Our socialization. So our culture, I think, plays a big role here.
Ours is abusing power as opposed to exercising power. They were showing a video of baggage claims in different airports. Things are flung and they showed it was so bad. In fact, I was like, Kenya is not so bad. Then it showed Japan. And you're right, you know, how they handle it with care, put it. Other countries, your suitcases will go. You just pray for your things.
You're like, I thought nearly full. This
and that's why there's a lot of dents. Then they show the suitcases after and it's got scratches or dents. But anyway, so I know we'll come back to that issue of maybe it's related, the culture, the empathy. But it's really interesting hearing what other countries, how the countries do it. But
what is the content of this training as well? Because then the other examples were Finland with about three or more years of university level training for police officers, a focus on human rights that emphasizes mediation, negotiation, and protection of dignity. Of course, there's also a high level of trust within the public and very low levels of corruption. The Singaporean police force, fast reaction to incidents because they use technology, strict internal discipline, community engagement, and surveillance. You start seeing the common threads. New Zealand, policing by consent. They focus on partnerships and trust rather than heavy-handed enforcement. They do not routinely carry guns, that is police officers. Use of force is a last resort.
Our traffic police officers don't carry guns. How are they?
Ooh. They can be aggressive.
They are not armed.
They are armed vocally.
Hana bunduki, by the way, ata rungu hana. What do we see?
bado tu wanakutisha. So it goes back. What's in this? What's in the training? What's in the culture? What's in our perception of police? I genuinely, when you spoke about defund the police earlier on, when people heard defund the police, it sounded ludicrous because you just want us to descend into chaos and to live like animals and to go back to the Stone Ages. But it came from very genuine concerns about the culture of policing and where it comes from. In the US specifically, we know what their issues look like with policing, with racial profiling. So defund was just a move of like, how do we take away the power? And the answer that actual people, academics who had thought through it, gave when people said, what about the vacuum that will be left if you defund the police or if you shut down the police? The answer almost always comes to community policing.
Yes.
To coming back to finding out, because escalations are the extreme end of the law spectrum.
That's true.
Right? When you need someone to be in a jail cell, when you need that to happen. If you do have strong community policing, a lot of things can be dealt with at that level without needing to then go to higher levels into escalation.
That's a good
We've
point.
talked about how many people are in remand and in jail right now because they cannot afford bail or bond, not because they are guilty of a said crime. How many were just not able to get representation? That tells you that as much as the jails are full, a lot of it is misdemeanors. It's crimes that should not have ended up like that. Community service would have done them justice, would have been more rehabilitative. So then like all these things are threaded together.
They're threaded. And I remember, if I remember correctly, but I'll have to, rejig my memory, they were also talking about where that funding can go to. So they were saying, we're not saying defund to punish, we're saying, can we spread out some of that funding to perhaps go to, I don't know, if it's rehab, they talked about the other sort of like, so to speak, allies, quote unquote, of law enforcement, and especially I think for lack of a better word, the people who interact initially with this person. Is it rehab? Is it social services? Is it social workers? They were like, can we scale that capacity, because they're intervening with this person. If they are a problematic citizen,
of course,
they can be able to figure out, how am I addressing your issues and your needs before you feel the need to escalate into a completely lawless citizen.
Right.
So it was an interesting conversation. But yeah, this thing of culture.
For us, it's refund the police or fund the police. Just fund
For
them.
us, there's fund the police,
true.
and then also make sure that you fund communities, because as well, just like we were saying yesterday, there is that disproportionate use of force or application of force and authority by the police service. You go to some parts of just this city, and the youth there just know, I cannot get out of my house after 6:30 p.m. Kwai ntalala ndani. It is clear. Parts of this city, you'll find youth just roaming around the city at 3 a.m.
Right.
Okay? There are guys who atulikuwa nje saa 9.
They can't fathom.
Yeah. Listen to that song. Cheku yufala mekaa amezubaa na Subaru ya Mambaru imekaa imejaa. This guy is just zooming here. Na ile ni Subaru ya Mambaru. What is your problem?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you?
Why are you tempting
And the
fate?
cops will come with the kingudu. And
Alikamba
wekelea it on
kinini.
you.
Yeah.
And say, ulikuwa na bangi. Twende ndani. That is what that song is telling us. That's the lived reality of Kenyans. Okay? Now, what, for example, does the Maraga Task Force? The Maraga Task Force acknowledges work done by the Ransley. I'm telling you, we have Ransley. At a point, even the 2010 Ransley Task Force also made that the National Police Service lacks competent leadership with strategic vision and commitment to discharge its mandate. The task force established that most of the legal frameworks required for effective and professional police performance are in place, but these are all not adhered to due to lack of competence and lethargy to undertake the required reforms in the service.
Lethargy.
Guys at the top, they just don't have the commitment. There are some who are qualified, they just don't see. They have the lethargy.
need.
And then there are those who are at the top and they just don't have the competence to be the boss of 40,000 strong police service.
But you have that office. You should not have taken the job
That's
if you
it.
can't handle the job.
That's it. But you were given the job.
But you were given
you
the
see,
job.
that's the thing. Why do we have the incompetent people at the helm of the police service? That's what the Ransley report is saying. That's what the Maraga report is saying.
Right.
And that's where the National Police Service Commission was established. Okay? to make sure that we have professionals who are appointed to become the bosses of the police, that they understand policing, they understand law enforcement, they understand the role of the community, they understand, you know, all those things. They bring in that competence.
You were saying, Hapo, yeah. It's plain as day, but not to the people in charge.
High key 87, guys. We all know how things work in Kenya. We can beat about the bush all day, but we know wherein the problem lies. Well, that's what we are trying to unpack.
We know where the problem lies, and that's why we're saying we need to sort out this problem.
Yeah, because we also can't be saying we know where the problem lies. I know people are exasperated. I always say that one is valid, but that's not going to get us anywhere. Take your time to pour into yourself, do what you need to do, and then show up, you know, in your own capacity in the best way you can. Exposure, learning to unlearn, and totally taking control of our resources, corruption-free, will do the best to reforms, not just by words, so that this is a corruption-free area. Yeah, learning to unlearn and taking control of our resources. I'm not sure what that would look like, but, you know, at the heart of this, yeah, there's a culture. I think when Eric said it, and I can see one or two people agreeing, and I'm trying to remember, I can't believe I can now say 30 years ago. Wow.
You're trying to remember 30 years ago.
I'm just like, 30 years? Oh my God, I almost gasped. You're like
when was that? And guys, 30 years ago is not 1970. No. It's 1994. It's 95, sorry.
The other day when I did a Beijing thing for 30 years ago, people in the comments were like, don't lie. 30 years was not 1995, Janet. I refuse.
It's not possible.
I'm like, honey,
no
it is.
Way.
We are there. But I'm trying to think about what the relationship with police was like at then. I mean, I was a child. I can remember being told, obviously, fear them, respect them. But I don't remember being told, fear them to the point where you can't look at them, you can't question them. Again, I fast forward to what African-American boys are being told right now in the US. You know, and they get to 10, 11, 12, and they're told, listen, if you're going to walk from here to school and you see an office, you do this, you do that. Kids are being told this. They're being told this is how you respond.
30 years ago? It was the same.
Was it the same?
Oh, yes.
I was a child. So
depends on where you are. Okay? These kids in Dandora and Mathare, 30 years ago, the adults now, who are telling their children now, today in Dandora and Mathare, chunga. It's the same thing they were being told by their parents 30 years ago. In Huruma, chunga, usikwenje. It's the same. And that's why that time in the agitation for let's change our constitution, key number one issue was police. Because remember, that's when people were disappearing, ending up in Nyayo torture chambers and all these other places. That was earlier in the late 80s into early 90s.
Right.
But it was the same police service. It was the same.
Interesting. So the issues have evolved.
Yes.
It's just taken on different names,
different
lives,
yeah.
different titles. The report names just keep being tweaked. But yeah, so it's an evolution of the problem. Yeah.
There's a caller in just as we get one last one. Mark, where is he from? Jackso? I am Mark. Good morning. Good morning, Mark.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine.
All right. What's your thought on our police reform conversation?
You know, I'm listening to you. I'm thinking that the problem we have with the police regulations, but the constitution that we promulgated in 2010. The fact that the president is the head of the police. According to the constitution, the president is the chairman of the National Security Council, where the IGC.
No, he's not.
And I believe he's statement or a decision that the president makes as
sorry, Marco, I think we can't hear you well. But I get what you're saying. Don't conflict the two. There's a National Security Commission. I mean, the National Security Council and the National Police Service Commission. The National Security Council is a different, where the president is the chair of the National Security Council. It has the IG of police, the boss of the military, the KDF. It has the ministers for interior, for defense, and they make decisions on whether Kenya goes to war, basically, and how we're maintaining national security. The National Police Service has a chair of the commission who is independent of the IG of police, and the IG of police is independent of the chair of the commission. It's meant to be the National Police Service actually oversees the running of the police service.
Right.
That the Inspector General of Police is answerable to the chair, the National Police Service Commission. But because we have the hang-ups that Wakili Willis Otieno was telling us, we also are like, aye. No, Bwana, the president should, no.
The president should appoint.
Otherwise, now, surely the president should, as in the president cannot summon the Inspector General of Police and ask what's happening in Garissa. No. So we brought that thread back into that. But that's where some of the confusion come into these structural issues and all that. Each report quotes another report. The Waki Commission is quoted here. The Ransley report is quoted there. There's a special rapporteur on extrajudicial killings who came to Kenya, prepared a report. All these keep quoting one other report. I think one way for us to fix this issue is to reclaim our independent institutions. We reclaim our institutions. We've talked about here. Remember we had Mashari Anjero, who was the first chair of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA. And he said, it's been taken. It's been captured. IPOA has been captured. National Police Service Commission has been captured. Even Justice Maraga says the same. You have the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is struggling, but there's a struggle to capture it. EACC captured. If we go back and now recapture our institutions, that's one way. Make sure the National Police Service Commission has the right people. Then they ought to make sure that the leadership of the National Police is the Inspector General is the right person, the Deputy Inspector, the Inspectors General are the right people, and the structure of police service is working. We make sure that we've put money where it should go and it goes in the right places.
Specifically, IPOA and the National Police Service Commission, how do we recapture those? Because a lot of us are not rank and file in the police service. We don't know their ins and outs. Okay.
So the membership of the National Police Service Commission is advertised. They serve, it's commissioners who serve a certain tenure.
Right.
And it's clear the length of the tenure. Their tenure ends, they leave. Okay. New ones are recruited via public interviews led by the a selection panel. Now that's where we come in. Who is joining the IPOA?
Right.
Who is joining the National Police Service Commission? Is it the right person? If it's not, we say no. We reject IPOA. And we tell Parliament, say no to that nominee. Like that.
Ooh. Okay.
Because the president doesn't pick. The president is given names. The president's job here is just serving as the ceremonial head of state.
And saying, tick.
Yeah, I hope this lands with people to understand what active citizenship is. It's not an occasional, it's not just a ballot. It's literally every independent, any post that is advertised, any interview that is being carried out, whether you want to participate. I know some people are like, why would I want to? But that is an option. Active citizenship, do we fully understand what that means? Do we fully understand how we can shift different institutions and culture in this country? I think we need to, let's understand that power that we have. I was going to make a vile joke, so I decided to let it slide. Because I was just like, as you're saying, the institutions are...
Is it so bad?
It's also...
Go for it.
I was going to say we allowed institutions to be captured, and now people are being captured.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it starts that way. It starts with the things that you don't really see openly. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, we are also falling victim to this same capture and co-opting. So active citizenship, guys, please.
Let me quote again. I'm just quoting. This one report is the Maraga report.
Right.
It makes reference to other things that we talked about in the period.
Yeah.
Article 232 of the Constitution lays down the values and principles of public service, which include responsive, prompt, effective, impartial, equitable provision of services. As regards the National Police Service, Article 239 of the Constitution directs the service to be impartial and not to further any interest of a political party or cause or prejudice a political interest or political cause that's legitimate under the Constitution. As is stated in the Waki Commission and Ransley Task Force reports, past misuse of the police for partisan political objectives has significantly eroded public trust and professionalism in the service. Further, the Constitution requires NPS to be transparent and accountable in the discharge of its mandate and to strive for the highest standards of professionalism and discipline among its members, qualities that it sorely lacks. The letter and spirit of these constitutional provisions is to have all positions, especially in the leadership cadres of the National Police Service, competitively filled, as is the case with all recruitment in other government institutions. However, regrettably, we brought in the National Security Laws Miscellaneous Amendment Act in 2014 and changed these things, where we repealed the provision of the National Police Service to providing for an open, transparent and competitive recruitment of the IG and the deputy IGs of police.
Right.
So we have it in the Constitution, and then we go in
repeal.
there and we repeal, and now the National Police Service is not the one that picks the leadership of this police service.
Can you imagine if we were to interrogate track records of IGs, same way we've interrogated those of the commissioners, and we say you were stationed here, this happened during your tenure, what part did you play in it, how did you de-escalate, what was the issue, like that.
That's
Ivo,
That's it.
that would have been
And
us.
that is what happened, by the way, when David Kimayo was recruited as the first IG of police. He was recruited by the National Police Service Commission. Okay? So people will come and say, you know, he said, what was that word that he used? Siege.
Siege, yes. We're under Siege.
Under Siege. But David Kimayo had risen through the ranks, was experienced in various ways of policing and all, and he was picked by the National Police Service Commission, Inspector General of Police. So the National Police Service Commission should then have looked at and seen, okay, have you performed your job well? Have you done any? Do we make changes? And appoint the next IG. But that was the only IG that was picked independent of the president. The president has picked all other IGs since then.
Great constitution, but we love to either pretend we didn't see.
Yeah, we love to betray the Constitution.
Betray.
That
Yeah,
is
that's
my
the
biggest
word.
heartbreak.
That's the word.
I'm like, it's MC Roy, one password official. By the way, some of your usernames, guys. It's actually, maybe it's McCoy. McCoy. The issue to do with police misconduct is being contributed by all of us in Kenya. We take part each and every day in dragging it down. We witness corrupt acts everywhere. We even support it by taking. Smallest ever, if the police operate independently, it would be a win-win situation as they would face the consequences of their reckless decisions without presidential protection. Okay, so McCoy has kind of summed up what we've said, which is, well, not really summed up, but it's a sense of, as a call to action, it's an everyday, every one of us. I know it sounds so big and so difficult, but then we can't keep leaving this to other people. We keep leaving it to other, to either certain civil society organizations. That's okay, that's what they're meant for. But I feel like we remove ourselves. Now we need to pour ourselves in to these organizations that are trying to make sure that we have oversight, that we have accountability, that we have justice. We need to do that. I think going forward, it almost needs to be something that is a non-negotiable with yourself. How am I either resourcing or participating or volunteering or sharing? Every one of us. One of the callers said we have to raise our voices, and that's one way to do it, by pouring into those who are already raising their voices.
True.
And not saying, let's see tomorrow what this organization comes up with. Okay, let's see next week what, hey, I can't wait to see who Faith from LSK is going to rescue next.
Right.
Faith's probably tired also, but she's doing it because she's saying this is an everyday, every one of us act of active citizenship. It has to be.
It has to be an all of us job.
An all of us job. How do we reform the police?
Wow. Hey, Mariam.
As we wrap.
We reclaim our police. Our police has been captured by the powers that be, the centralists who were there before we gave ourselves a new constitution. They've come back and they're starting to mutilate our constitution. They've retaken our police and they've turned it into a police force again. The way to do it is to go back to the letter and spirit of our constitution and we reclaim our police service.
It's powerful. What do you think?
No, I couldn't have said that better. I was looking for a fix. I honestly didn't have one. I didn't know where to begin. I think that's a good place to begin. I feel like the answers to all of our problems are found in our constitution. We just, like you said, we betray it consistently. So I'll go with Eric's. For me, it's just to send like empathy out as we close the show. A lot of empathy for anyone who lost a loved one last year and has now had to relive that, the demonstrations and the killings that came as a result. Just sending condolences and love, and to in large part, I just want to hope that there's justice at the end of this. And I think justice takes many forms. It doesn't bring anyone back, but if at least we can continue pulling at this thread of police reform and of justice for the lost lives and prosecutions for anyone who did fire at a civilian who was unarmed and anyone who did disappear someone, then I think maybe it's some form of a start.
Thank you for that, man. Yeah, and we'll keep their names alive as long as we're able to, as far as we're able to, on whatever platforms, whether here, whether on our individual platforms. We cannot forget. It has to be a reminder. It's a painful reminder. Thank you for speaking to families who've been re-triggered by this. But let the families not be the only ones grieving. We absolutely must grieve along with the families of people who died very innocently. A lot to take in here. I've really enjoyed this conversation because sometimes you just need your anger to be placed at on a platform where you can unpack it with conversation. And so, this just reminds us. And can we do a rededication of the Constitution when it turns 15? Whether you do a rededication of vows, please, let's just be like, here, we want to honor you again. Thank you for what you have continued to try to do. We've betrayed you. We are sorry. Let's try again. We do a renewal of vows with our Constitution.
I love this idea.
Yeah. Okay.
The ones who wrote our national anthem did not put these words in stanza 4, then we reduced them. They put it in the first stanza. O God of all creation, bless this our land and nation. Justice be our shield and defender. It's right there. Even if you don't sing the entire national anthem, you'll always sing this particular line. Justice be our shield and defender.
I love that.
May we all dwell in unity, peace and liberty. Plenty be found within our borders. It encompasses and brings in everything. Yeah.
We have Keeping Secrets in Relationships coming up next with Your World. They're going to be here in studio, dating, marriage, and the fine line between privacy and deception. Sometimes Your World mkona kazi. Sawa Umikali and Winnie. All the best. All the best. Thank you for being on Fixing the Nation with Janet Bogwa, Mariam Bishar, Eric Latif. Thank you for your Miss Me with that. So many loading.
So many loading. Thank you guys, because this was a brainstorm. I just put it together, but thank you.
Lovely.
Right.
Asante sana. See you tomorrow. I may be in tomorrow, maybe in remotely tomorrow, but
we carry your spirits irregardless.
Irregardless.
See you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Have a good one.